The crimson stain of Rebecca's blood still tainted Sarah Yates' hands as she knelt on the wooden floorboards of her modest cabin, scrubbing desperately at the remnants of her friend's childbirth. 3 days had passed since Rebecca's labor had ended in tragedy, leaving behind a newborn daughter and a gaping hole in Sarah's heart. Now, as the spring of 1875 settled over Sweetwater, Wyoming territory, Sarah found herself alone with her grief and a letter clutched in her trembling fingers, a letter that would change everything. Your husband has abandoned his debts and fled west. The bank will seize your property by month's end unless payment is received in full. Sarah's breath caught in her throat as she read the banker's words for the 10th time. Harold, her husband of 7 years, had disappeared 3 weeks ago, taking their meager savings and leaving her with nothing but a mountain of debt. She had been clinging to hope that he had traveled to Cheyenne for business as he claimed, but the truth now lay bare before her. The cabin, once a symbol of their future together, now felt like a prison of betrayal. Sarah crossed to the window, gazing out at the rolling Wyoming landscape that stretched toward the distant mountains. At 32, she was neither young bride nor established matron, but somewhere in between, a woman with calloused hands and fading dreams. A cloud of dust on the horizon caught her attention. Someone was approaching on horseback, and Sarah's stomach tightened with dread. Was it the banker, Mr. Hollister, coming to deliver more bad news? Or perhaps Harold, returning with excuses as hollow as his promises? But as the rider drew closer, she recognized the broad shoulders and distinctive Stetson hat of Samuel Young, owner of the Double Circle Ranch that bordered the eastern edge of what had been her property. Samuel had been a constant, if distant, presence in Sweetwater since arriving 4 years ago. His cattle operation had flourished, while smaller ranchers like Harold struggled against the harsh Wyoming elements. Sarah smoothed her apron, suddenly aware of her disheveled appearance. She had been up since dawn, trying to salvage what she could before the inevitable foreclosure. Her dark hair was coming loose from its practical bun, and her blue dress bore the stains of her morning labors. A firm knock at the door startled her from her thoughts. "Mrs. Yates," Samuel's deep voice carried through the weathered pine. Sarah opened the door, squinting against the bright midday sun. Samuel Young stood before her, hat in hand, the Wyoming wind ruffling his light brown hair. At 38, his face carried the weathered lines of a man who spent his days under the open sky, but his eyes, a startling shade of green, remained clear and direct. "Mr. Young," she acknowledged, her voice steadier than she felt. "What brings you to my door?" Samuel shifted his weight, an uncharacteristic display of discomfort from a man known for his decisiveness. "May I come in, Mrs. Yates? I have a matter of some importance to discuss." Sarah hesitated, then stepped aside. Her husband's debts were no secret in a town as small as Sweetwater, and the knowledge that this successful rancher had come to witness her humiliation stung more than she cared to admit. Samuel entered, his tall frame making the cabin seem suddenly smaller. He placed his hat on the table, revealing a spray of silver at his temples that Sarah hadn't noticed before. "I've just come from town," he began, his gaze direct. "I spoke with Mr. Hollister at the bank." Sarah's fingers twisted in her apron. "I imagine the whole town knows of my situation by now." Samuel nodded, not bothering with empty denials. "Your husband owes considerable sums to various businesses in Sweetwater, and now they've learned he's fled to California." California. The word fell from Sarah's lips like a stone. Harold had gone that far, with no intention of returning. "There's talk that he took up with a widow heading west on the last stage," Samuel added, then immediately looked as though he regretted his words. Sarah turned away, unwilling to let this man, practically a stranger, witness the devastation of this final betrayal. She had suspected Harold's faithlessness, had endured his growing coldness, but to be abandoned so completely. "I didn't come to bring you news of your husband, Mrs. Yates," Samuel continued after a moment. "I came with a proposition." Sarah turned back, wariness creeping into her expression. "What kind of proposition would a man like you have for a woman in my position, Mr. Young?" If Samuel was offended by her tone, he didn't show it. Instead, he pulled a folded document from his vest pocket and placed it on the table between them. "I've settled your debts, Mrs. Yates, all of them." Sarah stared at him, certain she had misheard. "You've what?" "I've paid off everything Harold owed to the bank, to the general store, to the feed and grain. The property is clear of all liens." He gestured to the document. "This is the deed, signed back to your name alone." Sarah approached the table cautiously, as if the paper might burn her fingertips. She unfolded it with trembling hands, recognizing Mr. Hollister's precise handwriting and official stamp. It was true. The homestead, 20 acres with the cabin, barn, and small corral, was now solely in her name. "Why would you do this?" She looked up sharply, suspicion replacing shock. "What do you want in return, Mr. Young?" Samuel met her gaze steadily. "Your time, Mrs. Yates, nothing more." "My time," Sarah repeated, confusion evident in her voice. "I need help at my ranch. My housekeeper, Mrs. Abernathy, is returning east to care for her ailing sister, and I find myself in need of someone to cook, keep the house, and occasionally assist with the books." Sarah's eyes narrowed. "And for this, you've paid debts that must amount to over $1,000. $1,247.36, Samuel confirmed without hesitation. "And yes, in exchange for 1 year of your service. You'd have your own quarters in my house, meals provided, and $20 a month besides." Sarah nearly laughed at the absurdity of it. "You could hire 10 housekeepers for that amount, Mr. Young. What is your real purpose?" A flash of something irritation. Embarrassment crossed his features. "My purpose is exactly as stated. I need help running my household, and you need a fresh start. When the year is done, you'll have this property free and clear, plus wages to begin again properly." "And if I refuse?" Samuel reached for his hat. "Then the deed is still yours. The debts are paid regardless. But I hope you'll consider my offer. The double circle is only 5 miles east. You'd be welcome to visit your property whenever you wish." Sarah's mind raced. She had been prepared to lose everything, to be thrown out with nothing but the clothes on her back. Now this man, this near stranger, had not only saved her property, but was offering her honest work and wages. "Why me?" she asked finally. "There are unmarried women in town who would jump at such an opportunity." Samuel placed his hat back on his head, adjusting it with practiced ease. "Perhaps I prefer someone who understands the value of hard work and perseverance, someone who has weathered difficulties with dignity." He moved toward the door, then paused. "Take some time to consider. I'll return tomorrow for your answer." With that, he was gone, leaving Sarah standing beside her table, the deed to her reclaimed property beneath her fingertips, and a decision that would alter the course of her life awaiting her response. The night brought little sleep to Sarah. She paced the small cabin, weighing her options in the flickering light of a single oil lamp. The deed Samuel had left sat on the table, a tangible symbol of unexpected salvation. But salvation at what cost? She was no fool. A woman alone accepting a position in a bachelor's household invited speculation, regardless of separate quarters or proper intentions. Sweetwater might be small, but gossip traveled faster than the weekly stagecoach. Yet what choice did she truly have? Her skills were limited. She could sew adequately, cook passably, and keep accounts with reasonable accuracy, all useful for maintaining a household but insufficient for true independence. Teaching positions required formal education she didn't possess. The general store already employed the widowed Mrs. Lawson, and the hotel would never hire a woman whose husband had abandoned her with unpaid debts. By dawn, exhaustion had settled into her bones, but her mind was clear. When Samuel Young returned at mid-morning, Sarah was waiting on the porch, a small trunk packed with her essential belongings. "I accept your offer," she said simply, standing as he dismounted, "but I have conditions of my own." A flicker of surprise crossed Samuel's face, followed by the barest hint of a smile. "I'm listening, Mrs. Yates. I'll work for you for 1 year, as agreed. I'll cook, clean, and keep your books. But my reputation must remain untarnished. I'll need written terms of employment that I can show anyone who questions the arrangement." Samuel nodded. Already prepared. He reached into his saddlebag and withdrew a document. Mrs. Abernathy suggested the same precaution. Sarah took the paper, scanning the formal language that outlined her duties, compensation, and living arrangements. It was straightforward and proper, with nothing that could invite misinterpretation. "Second," she continued, "I'll need to visit my property at least twice monthly to ensure it's maintained. I'll ensure you have transportation whenever you wish to check on your homestead." Sarah took a deep breath. "And finally, I want to understand why you're doing this, Mr. Young." The truth this time. Samuel's expression remained inscrutable as he considered her words. "The truth is rarely simple, Mrs. Yates," he said finally, "but I give you my word that I have no dishonorable intentions. Beyond that, my reasons are my own for now." It wasn't the answer she wanted, but Sarah recognized it was likely the most honest she would receive. "Very well. When do we leave?" "Now, if you're ready. I've brought the wagon for your belongings." Sarah glanced back at the cabin that had been her home for 7 years. Within its walls, she had known both contentment and despair. She had nursed Harold through pneumonia, celebrated modest harvests, and wept silent tears as the distance between them grew. "I'm ready," she said, turning back to Samuel. The journey to Double Circle Ranch passed mostly in silence. Samuel handled the team with easy confidence, while Sarah absorbed the changing landscape. They traveled east through rolling grasslands dotted with spring wildflowers, crossing a shallow creek where cottonwoods stretched their fresh green leaves toward the sky. As they crested a low rise, the Double Circle spread before them, a sprawling operation that made Sarah's modest homestead seem like a child's plaything. A 2-story main house of solid construction stood as the centerpiece, surrounded by well-maintained outbuildings, corrals, and bunkhouses. In the distance, cattle grazed on verdant pastures. "It's larger than I expected," Sarah remarked, breaking the long silence. "Started with 50 acres and 12 head of cattle," Samuel replied. "Now it's 3,000 acres and nearly 800 head. You've accomplished much in 4 years." Samuel's hands tightened almost imperceptibly on the reins. "I didn't start from nothing. My father left me an inheritance that I invested wisely." The wagon rolled past the main corral, where several cowboys paused in their work to touch their hats respectfully as Samuel passed. Sarah felt their curious glances and sat straighter, chin lifted slightly. "The men are aware of your position," Samuel said, seeming to read her thoughts. "They'll treat you with the same respect they showed Mrs. Abernathy." "And how many men do you employ, Mr. Young?" 15 regular hands, more during roundup and branding. "Foreman's name is Mitchell Cooper, good man. Been with me since I established the ranch. Cook for the bunkhouse is Tom Fletcher. You'll only need to prepare meals for the main house." They pulled up before the imposing 2-story structure. Built of sturdy timber with a deep porch wrapping around the front, it spoke of prosperity without ostentation. Samuel helped Sarah down from the wagon, maintaining a proper distance as she straightened her skirts. "Mrs. Abernathy," Samuel called as he opened the front door. A plump, gray-haired woman appeared from what Sarah presumed was the kitchen, wiping her hands on a well-worn apron. Her shrewd eyes assessed Sarah instantly. "So you've agreed then, Mrs. Yates?" Mrs. Abernathy asked without preamble. "I have," Sarah confirmed. The older woman nodded briskly. "Good. I've only 3 days to show you the workings of this house before I must leave. Come, I'll show you to your room first, then we'll begin with the kitchen." Sarah followed, grateful for the businesslike approach that left no time for awkwardness. The room designated for her use was at the rear of the house on the main floor, modest but comfortable, with a real bed, washstand, small dresser, and even a braided rug covering the polished wooden floor. A window overlooked a kitchen garden, providing both light and privacy. "Mr. Young had this room built specifically for household help," Mrs. Abernathy explained. "Said no one should have to sleep in an attic or basement if he could provide better." Sarah set her small bag on the bed. "It's more than adequate. The house has 4 bedrooms upstairs, Mr. Young's, 2 guest rooms, and one he's converted to a library of sorts. You'll be responsible for keeping all rooms clean, though the guest rooms are rarely used except when the cattle buyers come through." The next 3 days passed in a flurry of information, as Mrs. Abernathy instructed Sarah on every aspect of running the household. The kitchen was well equipped, the pantry generously stocked. Samuel, it seemed, appreciated good food but was not particular about specific dishes. He breakfasted at dawn, took a midday meal if he was near the house, and expected dinner at 6 unless ranch business kept him away. "He's not one for fancy entertaining," Mrs. Abernathy said as she showed Sarah the china cabinet. "These haven't been used since I arrived 2 years ago. But he keeps them for someday, whatever that means." On the evening before Mrs. Abernathy's departure, Samuel joined them in the kitchen after dinner, bringing a bottle of good whiskey and 3 glasses. "A toast," he said, pouring modest amounts, "to Mrs. Abernathy's devoted service and safe journey east, and to Mrs. Yates for agreeing to take on this household." They drank, Sarah noting the smooth burn of quality spirits. Mrs. Abernathy excused herself shortly after, leaving Sarah suddenly alone with her new employer. The reality of her situation alone in a house with a man she barely knew, miles from town, settled uncomfortably around her. Samuel seemed to sense her disquiet. "I know this arrangement isn't conventional, Mrs. Yates, but I want to assure you again that you have nothing to fear from me. This house may be remote, but it's not removed from accountability. My men would not tolerate any impropriety toward you, nor would I wish them to." Sarah studied him in the lamplight. There was something in his manner, a careful distance, perhaps, that suggested his own history contained complications. "Thank you for that assurance, Mr. Young. I hope I'll serve your household well during my time here." "I have no doubt." He rose, collecting the glasses. "Good night, Mrs. Yates." That night in her new room, Sarah wrote in the journal she had kept since girlhood. The words came haltingly at first, then in a rush. "I find myself in the strangest of circumstances, beholden to a man I scarcely know, who has rescued me from ruin for reasons I cannot fathom. I should feel grateful, and I do. But beneath that gratitude lies unease. What does Samuel Young truly want from me? And why does his kindness feel more threatening than Harold's cruelty ever did?" The following morning, Mrs. Abernathy departed on the eastbound stage, leaving Sarah truly alone in her new position. She threw herself into work, finding comfort in the familiar rhythms of household tasks. The double circle operated like a well-oiled machine, each person knowing their role and performing it efficiently. Over the next 2 weeks, Sarah established her own routine. She rose before dawn to prepare breakfast for Samuel, who ate quickly and with little conversation before heading out to oversee the day's work. She spent mornings cleaning and organizing, afternoons baking and preparing the evening meal, and evenings reviewing the household accounts Samuel had entrusted to her care. The ranch books revealed a prosperous operation managed with meticulous attention. Samuel tracked every expense, from cattle purchases to the smallest repair, with precision that matched any banker's ledger. Yet for all his apparent financial success, he lived modestly. His clothing, while well-made, showed signs of long use. The furniture throughout the house was sturdy and practical, rather than ostentatious. Most evenings, Samuel returned for dinner, which they ate at opposite ends of the long dining table. Their conversation remained polite but limited, touching on the day's events at the ranch or necessary household matters. Occasionally, he would retire to his library afterward, while Sarah cleaned the kitchen and prepared for the following day. It was an existence far removed from the passionate dreams of her youth, yet not without its comforts. Samuel was unfailingly courteous, the work was straightforward, and for the first time in years, Sarah slept without worrying about unpaid debts or Harold's increasingly erratic behavior. On the morning marking her 3rd week at Double Circle, Sarah was kneading bread dough when Samuel entered the kitchen unexpectedly. "Mrs. Yates," he said, his usual formality in place despite the early hour. "I've had word that a group of cattle buyers will be arriving tomorrow. They'll stay 2 nights while we negotiate a contract for the fall drive." Sarah wiped flour from her hands. "How many should I expect for meals?" 4 buyers plus Mitchell and myself. They'll take breakfast and dinner here." He hesitated, then added, "These men appreciate fine dining. Mrs. Abernathy usually prepared something special." Sarah nodded, mentally cataloging the pantry contents. "I'll ensure the meals are suitable for business negotiations." "Thank you." He turned to leave, then paused. "Also, I thought you might wish to visit your property this afternoon. I need to ride to the north pasture which passes near your homestead. You're welcome to accompany me if you'd like." The unexpected offer caught Sarah by surprise. "Yes, I would appreciate that, thank you." A ghost of a smile touched Samuel's lips. "We'll leave after the midday meal then." True to his word, Samuel had a horse saddled and waiting when Sarah emerged from the house that afternoon. It was a gentle mare, already outfitted with a side saddle. "Mrs. Abernathy never rode," Samuel explained, seeing Sarah's surprise, "but I thought you might need mobility during your time here." "The mare's name is Willow. She's even-tempered but responsive." Sarah approached the horse, stroking its velvety nose. "She's beautiful, but I should warn you it's been some years since I've ridden regularly." "Willow will compensate for any rustiness," Samuel assured her, offering his hand to help her mount. They rode in companionable silence, the spring landscape vibrant around them. Wild lupine painted patches of purple against the green prairie, and meadowlarks called from fence posts along the way. Sarah found herself relaxing in the saddle, rediscovering the freedom that came with horseback travel. "You ride well," Samuel observed as they forded a shallow stream. "Not many women sit a horse with such natural ease." "My father raised horses in Missouri before the war," Sarah replied. "I practically grew up in the saddle." The memory brought a wistful smile. "He always said I had better hands than my brothers." Samuel studied her with new interest. "You never mentioned brothers." "Both lost at Shiloh," Sarah said simply. After that, Father lost heart for breeding cavalry mounts. We sold the farm and moved west with what remained of the herd. That's how I met Harold. He was working as a wrangler on a neighboring spread. They crested a hill, and Sarah's homestead came into view below. From this distance, it looked peaceful, almost idyllic. The cabin nestled against a stand of cottonwoods, the small barn weathered but sound, fields lying fallow but not yet overtaken by weeds. "Would you prefer to visit alone?" Samuel asked, reining his horse to a stop. Sarah appreciated the sensitivity of his offer. "No, please join me. I'd welcome your opinion on some repairs that might be needed." They dismounted in the yard, tethering the horses to the hitching post Harold had installed years ago. Sarah stood for a moment, absorbing the strangeness of being a visitor on her own property. Then, squaring her shoulders, she led Samuel on a circuit of the buildings. The cabin was secure, its windows intact, but the roof showed signs of potential leakage. The barn needed more immediate attention. Several boards had worked loose from the west wall, and the door hung crookedly on its hinges. "These repairs aren't difficult," Samuel commented, examining the barn door. "A day's work for a couple of men would set things right." "I'll need to hire someone when," Sarah began, then caught herself. "That is, after my year of service is complete." Samuel turned to face her, his expression unreadable. "I can send Mitchell and one of the hands over tomorrow." "No sense letting the damage worsen while you're fulfilling our arrangement." "That's not necessary," Sarah protested. "Our agreement doesn't include maintaining my property." "Consider it neighborly assistance," Samuel countered. "Besides, Mitchell could use a change from the regular routine." Before Sarah could argue further, a movement near the cabin caught her attention. A young woman was approaching hesitantly, a small bundle in her arms. With a start, Sarah recognized Hannah Oliver, Rebecca's 16-year-old sister, carrying the infant Rebecca had died delivering. "Mrs. Yates." Hannah called, uncertainty in her voice. "Is that really you?" Sarah hurried toward her. "Hannah, what are you doing here?" The girl's face reflected both relief and anxiety. "I've been coming by every few days hoping to find you. Uncle Thomas says I can't keep the baby unless I find proper work, and I thought maybe." She trailed off as she noticed Samuel standing a respectful distance away. Sarah quickly made introductions, explaining Hannah's situation in brief terms. Samuel listened attentively, his expression softening as he regarded the young woman and infant. "Miss Oliver," he said gently, "has your uncle contacted the authorities about finding the child's father?" Hannah shook her head, eyes downcast. "He was a drummer passing through. Rebecca never even told him about the baby." Sarah cradled the sleeping infant, a tiny girl with wisps of dark hair and Rebecca's delicate features. "What have you named her?" "Hope," Hannah whispered, "because that's what Rebecca said she wanted most for her daughter." An uncomfortable silence fell, broken only by the soft cooing of the baby. Sarah looked from the infant to Hannah, seeing the exhaustion etched on the young woman's face. A decision formed in her mind. "Mr. Young," she said, turning to Samuel, "might I speak with you privately for a moment?" They stepped away, leaving Hannah rocking the baby near the cabin steps. "Those cattle buyers arriving tomorrow," Sarah began without preamble. "They'll need someone to serve the meals and attend to their rooms." "Yes," Samuel nodded slowly. "That had been my expectation for you, yes. I'd like to propose an adjustment to our arrangement. Hannah needs employment and a safe place to raise her niece. She's young but capable. Rebecca taught her household management just as their mother taught them both. She could assist me at Double Circle, learning to cook and keep accounts while caring for Hope." Samuel considered this, his gaze drifting back to Hannah and the infant. "The house has room enough," he acknowledged. "But are you certain the girl is suited to such work?" She looks barely more than a child herself. She's 16, old enough to marry in these territories, though far too young in my opinion, but she's responsible and dedicated to her niece. With proper guidance, she could become an excellent housekeeper. Samuel stroked his jaw thoughtfully. And you would provide this guidance? I would. In fact, Sarah added, gathering her courage, I propose that Hannah assume most of my duties at the main house. In exchange, I would take charge of organizing your business records and correspondence. Mrs. Abernathy mentioned you find that aspect of ranching tedious. A flicker of surprise crossed Samuel's features. You're proposing to become my ranch secretary rather than my housekeeper. I've managed complex household accounts for years, Mr. Young, and I've reviewed your books these past weeks. Your operation is prosperous, but could benefit from more systematic record keeping. Hannah would manage the house with my supervision, while I would organize your business affairs with your oversight. Samuel studied her with newfound respect. You've given this considerable thought in a very short time, Mrs. Yates. I recognize an opportunity that could benefit everyone involved, Sarah replied steadily. Hannah and Hope gain security, you gain better organization for your growing business, and she hesitated. Yes, Samuel prompted. I gain the satisfaction of helping a young woman avoid some of the mistakes I made at her age, Sarah finished quietly. For a long moment, Samuel said nothing, his gaze moving from Sarah to Hannah and back again. Finally, he nodded. Your proposal has merit. Let's discuss the specifics with Miss Oliver. Hannah's eyes filled with tears of relief when they outlined the arrangement. You mean Hope and I could stay together, and I'd learn proper housekeeping and cooking. You'd work hard, Sarah cautioned. The ranch is busy, and Mr. Young expects excellence in how his household is run. I'm not afraid of hard work, Hannah insisted, straightening her shoulders. And I learn quickly, I promise. Samuel regarded the girl with cautious approval. There's one condition I must insist upon, Miss Oliver. You must continue your education. Mrs. Yates will oversee lessons in mathematics and literature alongside your household duties. Hannah's eyes widened. Sir, I never expected such kindness. It's not kindness, but practical necessity, Samuel replied, though his tone belied the sternness of his words. An educated staff is an asset to any operation. Now, can you be ready to travel to Double Circle by tomorrow morning? We have guests arriving and Mrs. Yates will need your assistance. Hannah clutched Hope closer. We have very little to pack, sir. We can be ready whenever you wish. The return ride to Double Circle was charged with a new energy. Hannah and Hope traveled in the wagon Samuel sent for them, accompanied by one of his most trustworthy hands. Sarah and Samuel rode ahead, finalizing the details of their revised arrangement. The small room adjoining yours should serve for Hannah and the baby, Samuel suggested. It was intended as a sewing room, but Mrs. Abernathy preferred to work in the kitchen. That would be ideal, Sarah agreed. Close enough for me to assist with the baby when needed, but allowing Hannah some independence. As they approached the ranch, Sarah found herself studying Samuel with new interest. His willingness to accommodate Hannah and Hope revealed a compassion she hadn't fully recognized before. His insistence on continuing the girl's education suggested values beyond mere profit. Why did you really pay my debts, Mr. Young? She asked suddenly, the question emerging before she could reconsider. Samuel's rhythm faltered briefly before he regained his composure. Would you believe me if I said it was purely business calculation? A skilled housekeeper is valuable, as you've proven. No, Sarah replied honestly. No one makes a business investment of over $1,000 for household help, no matter how skilled. A rueful smile touched his lips. Perhaps someday I'll tell you the full story, Mrs. Yates. "For now, let's focus on preparing for our guests and settling Miss Oliver into her new position." The next morning dawned clear and promising, with Hannah already adapting to life at Double Circle. Despite her youth, she approached her duties with surprising maturity, following Sarah's instructions carefully as they prepared the house for the cattle buyer's arrival. "They'll expect coffee upon arrival, then we'll likely adjourn to Mr. Young's office to begin preliminary discussions," Sarah explained as they arranged fresh linens in the guest rooms. "We'll serve dinner at 7, following Mr. Young's cues for timing." Hannah nodded earnestly. "Should Hope remain in our room during meals?" "For now, yes. Once the buyers depart, we can discuss a more flexible arrangement." Sarah smoothed a pillowcase, remembering her own anxiety during her first formal dinner service years ago. "Don't worry about perfection, Hannah. Aim for competence and dignity. The rest will come with practice." The cattle buyers arrived mid-afternoon, four well-dressed men whose expensive suits couldn't quite disguise their fundamental connection to the land and livestock they traded. Samuel introduced Sarah briefly as his household manager, before leading the men to his office, where Mitchell Cooper joined them. The dinner that evening proved a success beyond Sarah's expectations. Hannah served each course with quiet efficiency, while Sarah had prepared a meal that showcased both her cooking skills and the ranch's prosperity: roast beef with savory gravy, potatoes whipped to creamy perfection, fresh spring vegetables, and an apple pie that drew appreciative comments from even the most taciturn buyer. "Mrs. Yates," Samuel said as the men lingered over coffee, "perhaps you could join us for a moment. Mr. Hargrove has some questions about our cattle tallies that your organizational skills might address." Sarah entered the dining room with composed confidence, answering questions about the ranch's inventory system with clarity and precision. She had spent the past week reorganizing Samuel's records, creating a more efficient method of tracking the herd's growth and movement between pastures. Later, after the buyers had retired to their rooms and Hannah had settled Hope for the night, Samuel found Sarah in the kitchen, preparing for the following morning's breakfast. "You impressed them," he said without preamble. "Hargrove asked if you might be available to review his own operations record-keeping methods." Sarah looked up from the biscuit dough she was preparing. "I'm already employed, Mr. Young, or have our arrangements changed again?" "Not unless you wish them to," Samuel replied, leaning against the doorframe. "But it confirms what I suspected when I first proposed our arrangement. You have talents that extend far beyond conventional housekeeping." Sarah felt a flush of pleasure at the unexpected praise. "Thank you. Though I should note that Hannah performed admirably this evening as well. She has a natural grace that will serve her well. You've both exceeded expectations." Samuel straightened, preparing to leave. "Good night, Mrs. Yates, and thank you for today's successes." As Samuel departed, Sarah realized something had shifted between them. A mutual respect had formed, laying groundwork for what might become genuine friendship. It was a small change, perhaps, but significant in the isolation of ranch life. The cattle buyers departed after concluding successful negotiations, and life at Double Circle settled into a new rhythm. Hannah assumed most of the household duties with growing confidence, while Sarah divided her time between mentoring the girl and organizing Samuel's business affairs. Hope became a beloved presence, her nursery cleverly arranged in the sewing room that now served as Hannah's chamber. 2 months passed, bringing the heat of Wyoming summer and the increased activity of ranch operations preparing for fall roundup. Sarah discovered an unexpected satisfaction in her work, transforming Samuel's haphazard record, keeping into a system that enhanced both efficiency and profitability. Hannah blossomed under Sarah's guidance, developing into a capable housekeeper while continuing lessons in mathematics, literature, and even basic Latin. Each Sunday, Samuel insisted the entire household observe a day of rest. While not overtly religious, he maintained that constant work dulled both mind and spirit. On these days, Hannah often took Hope to visit her uncle in Sweetwater, while Sarah used the time to ride Willow around the property or read from Samuel's surprisingly extensive library. It was during one such Sunday in late July that Sarah encountered Samuel near the creek that bordered the eastern pasture. She had ridden out early, seeking relief from the summer heat in the shade of the cottonwoods. Finding a pleasant spot, she dismounted to let Willow drink while she read from a volume of Wordsworth she had borrowed from Samuel's collection. "I wouldn't have taken you for a poetry enthusiast." Samuel's voice startled her from her reading. Sarah looked up to find him approaching on foot, his own mount tethered nearby. He had clearly been swimming, his hair was damp, and his shirt clung slightly to his shoulders. The same might be said of a cattle rancher with a library full of classics, she countered, marking her place in the book. Samuel smiled, more relaxed than she had ever seen him. "My mother was a schoolteacher before she married. She insisted education didn't end with childhood. She sounds like a remarkable woman." She was. Samuel settled on a nearby boulder, his expression growing distant. "She died when I was 16, influenza. My father followed 3 years later." The casual revelation of personal history was unprecedented. In their months of working together, Samuel had shared little about his past beyond the barest necessities. "I'm sorry," Sarah said simply. "Losing both parents so young must have been difficult." It was, but they left me well prepared and well provided for. He gestured toward the creek. "Mind if I join you for a while? The water's particularly cool in this spot." "Please," Sarah replied, feeling only slightly awkward at the informal arrangement. Their working relationship had evolved into something approaching friendship, but they had rarely spent time together outside of ranch business. "How is Hannah progressing with her studies?" Samuel asked, removing his boots to dangle his feet in the creek. "Remarkably well. She has a natural aptitude for mathematics that I wouldn't have expected. And the baby, Hope, seems to be thriving." Sarah smiled, thinking of the infant's recent attempts to roll over. "She's growing stronger every day. Hannah is an attentive mother figure despite her youth." "And you, are you finding your position satisfactory?" Samuel's question carried an undertone of genuine concern. Sarah considered before answering. "I am. More than I anticipated, in fact." There's satisfaction in creating order from chaos, in seeing tangible results from one's efforts. "Yet I sense a reservation," Samuel observed, demonstrating the perceptiveness that had increasingly characterized their interactions. "Not a reservation exactly," Sarah clarified. "More an awareness that this arrangement is temporary by design. In less than 10 months, I'll return to my homestead, and you'll need to find new staff." Samuel studied the water rippling over the smooth stones of the creek bed. "Unless circumstances change." "What circumstances might those be, Mr. Young?" Samuel, he corrected gently. "After all this time, perhaps we might use our given names, at least in private conversation." Sarah hesitated, then nodded. "Samuel, then, and I'm Sarah." "Sarah," he repeated, as if testing the sound of it. "To answer your question, circumstances often change in ways we don't anticipate. When I established this ranch, I never imagined employing a woman who would revolutionize my business operations, or providing a home for an orphaned infant." "Life rarely follows the paths we expect," Sarah agreed, thinking of her own journey from horse breeder's daughter to abandoned wife to ranch secretary. They sat in companionable silence for a time, listening to the creek's gentle murmur and the rustling of cottonwood leaves overhead. Sarah found herself studying Samuel's profile, the strong line of his jaw, the thoughtful set of his mouth, the way sunlight filtered through the trees to highlight strands of silver at his temples. "May I ask you something personal?" she ventured finally. "You may ask." "I reserve the right not to answer." "Fair enough." Sarah gathered her courage. "Have you never wished for a family of your own? Children to inherit this land you've worked so hard to build?" Samuel's expression remained calm, but she noticed a tightening around his eyes. "I was married once," he said quietly. "Briefly. She died in childbirth along with our son. That was 12 years ago, before I came west." The admission stunned Sarah. In all their months of working closely together, he had never hinted at such a personal tragedy. "I'm so sorry," she whispered, understanding now why he had been so willing to help Hannah and Hope. "I shouldn't have pried. You didn't know." Samuel picked up a small stone, turning it over in his fingers before skipping it across the water's surface. "After Eliza died, I threw myself into work, built a successful shipping business in Boston, lived comfortably but felt hollow. When my business partner suggested expanding west, I sold my shares and came to Wyoming to start fresh. Yet you came alone." "Yes." "I'd convinced myself that solitude was preferable to risking that kind of loss again." He looked directly at her then, his green eyes reflecting both past pain and present clarity. "But I'm beginning to question that assumption." The air between them seemed to still, charged with unspoken possibilities. Sarah found herself unable to look away, caught in a moment that felt pivotal, though she couldn't have explained why. The distant sound of hoofbeats broke the spell. Mitchell Cooper appeared around a bend in the creek, his expression urgent. "Mr. Young, been looking all over for you, sir. Telegram came from Cheyenne that breeding bull you ordered has arrived, but there's some dispute about the payment. Station master says you need to come settle it personally." Samuel stood immediately, all business once more. "When did this message arrive?" "About an hour ago. Tom's boy rode out with it." "I'll leave right away. With luck, I can reach Cheyenne by tomorrow afternoon." He turned to Sarah. "I may be gone several days. Can you manage things here?" "Of course," Sarah assured him, the intimate moment already receding like the ripples from Samuel's skipped stone. "Hannah and I will keep everything in order." Samuel nodded, already mentally calculating the journey ahead. "Mitchell, have Jackson prepare supplies for the trip. I'll meet you at the house in 20 minutes." As Mitchell rode back toward the ranch, Samuel gathered his boots and turned to Sarah one last time. "We'll continue our conversation when I return." It was both statement and question, an acknowledgement of something unfinished between them. "Yes," Sarah agreed simply. "We will." Samuel departed within the hour, leaving Sarah with an unexpected sense of absence that went beyond the practical challenges of managing the ranch in his stead. His revelation about his wife and child had illuminated so much about his character: his kindness toward Hannah and Hope, his willingness to give Sarah a fresh start, even his careful distance that now seemed less like disinterest and more like self-protection. The days of his absence stretched longer than anticipated. A telegram arrived explaining that complications with the bull's transportation would delay his return by at least a week. Sarah managed the ranch operations efficiently, working closely with Mitchell to ensure everything ran smoothly, but found herself watching the road from Cheyenne with increasing frequency as the days passed. "You miss him," Hannah observed one evening as they sat on the porch after dinner, Hope sleeping peacefully in a basket nearby. Sarah started to deny it automatically, then reconsidered. "I've grown accustomed to our working relationship," she admitted. "The ranch feels different without his presence." Hannah's knowing smile suggested she understood more than Sarah had expressed. "He looks at you differently than he looks at anyone else," the girl said with the directness of youth. "Like you're a puzzle he's trying to solve, but one he enjoys contemplating." "Hannah Oliver, you have an overactive imagination," Sarah chided gently, though the observation resonated more than she cared to admit. "Mr. Young and I have a professional arrangement, nothing more." "If you say so," Hannah replied, unconvinced. "But I've noticed he smiles more when you're in the room, and you always stand a little straighter when he enters." Before Sarah could formulate a response, the sound of approaching riders drew their attention. In the fading light, she could make out a group of horsemen coming up the main road, at least 6, moving fast and with purpose. "That's not Mr. Young's usual pace," Hannah said, rising to her feet. Sarah felt a prickle of unease. "Take Hope inside, Hannah. Lock the door and stay there until I call for you." The girl hesitated. "But what if—" "Now, Hannah." Sarah's tone brooked no argument. Once Hannah and Hope were safely inside, Sarah moved to the edge of the porch, straining to identify the approaching riders. As they drew closer, her blood ran cold. Leading the group was a man whose silhouette she would recognize anywhere: Harold Yates, her estranged husband. Sarah fought the instinct to retreat inside with Hannah. Instead, she squared her shoulders and stood her ground as the riders pulled up in front of the house. Harold dismounted first, his familiar swagger accentuated by expensive new clothing that suggested California had treated him well. "Well, well," he drawled, removing his hat with mocking courtesy. "If it isn't my devoted wife. Settled in nicely, I see." "What do you want, Harold?" Sarah kept her voice level, refusing to show the fear churning in her stomach. "Now, is that any way to greet your husband after a long absence?" Harold ascended the porch steps, stopping just short of where Sarah stood. Up close, she could smell whiskey on his breath. "Especially when I've come all this way to collect what's mine." "You abandoned any claim to me when you fled with our savings, leaving me to face your creditors alone," Sarah replied coldly. Harold's expression hardened. "Always so righteous, Sarah. It doesn't suit you." He gestured expansively at the ranch. "Looks like you landed on your feet. Found yourself a wealthy protector right quick, didn't you?" One of Harold's companions, a rough-looking man with a pockmarked face, called up from the yard. "This the place, Yates? Looks rich enough." "Oh, it's the place all right. Young's double-circle biggest spread between here and the Montana line." Harold's smile didn't reach his eyes. "And my dear wife has thoughtfully gained us access to the main house." The reality of the situation crystallized in Sarah's mind. "You're here to rob the ranch. Clever girl. Always were sharp with figures." Harold moved closer, lowering his voice. "California didn't pan out as planned, but your Mr. Young is known for keeping significant cash on hand to purchase cattle. All you need to do is show us where he keeps it, and we'll be on our way." "I won't help you steal from this ranch," Sarah stated firmly. Harold's facade of civility dropped. He grabbed Sarah's arm, pulling her roughly toward him. "You don't have a choice, wife. You're still legally mine, and you'll do as I say," or the unmistakable sound of a rifle being cocked interrupted his threat. Mitchell Cooper stood at the corner of the house, his Winchester leveled steadily at Harold's chest. "Let her go," Mitchell ordered, his voice deadly calm. "Now." Harold's grip tightened painfully before he released Sarah with a shove. "Well, looks like we've got company, boys." The standoff might have escalated to violence then, but fate intervened in the form of Samuel Young, who rode into the yard at that moment, accompanied by 2 of his hands. He took in the scene with one swift glance: Sarah standing defiant on the porch, Harold and his men frozen in position, Mitchell with his rifle ready. "What's happening here?" Samuel asked, his voice carrying the authority of a man on his own property. "Just a husband visiting his wife," Harold replied with false joviality. "No cause for weapons." Samuel dismounted, his movements deliberate. "Mrs. Yates works for me. She isn't receiving personal visitors this evening." He turned to Sarah. "Are you all right?" Sarah nodded, relieved beyond words at his timely arrival. "Yes, Mr. Yates and his friends were just leaving." Harold's eyes narrowed as he assessed the changing situation. With Samuel's arrival, the odds had shifted. "Now, let's not be hasty. I've come a long way to see my wife." "Ex-wife," Sarah corrected firmly. "The divorce papers were filed weeks ago. They should be finalized by now." This was news to Harold, whose momentary confusion gave Samuel the opportunity to take control of the situation. "Mr. Yates, I suggest you and your companions move on," Samuel said, his tone leaving no room for argument. "The nearest hotel is in Sweetwater, 15 miles east." For a tense moment, it seemed Harold might challenge the directive. Then, with a calculating glance at the armed men now surrounding him, he shrugged. "Another time, then. Come on, boys." As Harold and his men remounted, he fixed Sarah with a final, venomous look. "This isn't finished," he promised quietly. They watched in silence as the unwelcome visitors rode away, the sound of hoofbeats fading into the gathering darkness. Only when they had disappeared from sight did Sarah realize she was trembling. "Mitchell," Samuel said, "send riders to alert the sheriff in Sweetwater about our visitors. I want men watching the property tonight, 2-hour rotations." "Yes, sir." Mitchell hesitated. "You think they'll be back?" "Men like that rarely abandon their intentions so easily," Samuel replied grimly. "Double the guard on the north pasture where we're holding the new stock." As Mitchell departed to organize the ranch's defenses, Samuel turned to Sarah. "Are you truly all right? Did he hurt you?" The genuine concern in his voice broke through Sarah's composed facade. "I'm fine, just shaken. I never expected to see him again, especially not here." "Come inside," Samuel urged gently. "You look like you could use something stronger than tea." Inside, they found Hannah waiting anxiously, hope clutched protectively to her chest. "Is it safe?" I heard men's voices. "It's safe now," Samuel assured her. "But I'd like you and hope to sleep in the main house tonight as a precaution. There's a trundle bed in Sarah's room that you can use." While Hannah prepared for bed, Samuel poured 2 small glasses of brandy, handing one to Sarah. "Tell me what happened." Sarah described Harold's arrival and his thinly veiled intentions regarding the ranch's money. "He must be truly desperate to attempt something so foolish," she concluded. "Or truly confident in his ability to intimidate you into compliance," Samuel observed. "Was he always so forceful?" Sarah stared into her brandy, memories rising unbidden. Not at first. He could be charming when it suited him, but after a few failed ventures the drinking increased and with it his temper. She looked up, meeting Samuel's concerned gaze. "I never told anyone. It seemed like admitting failure." "It wasn't your failure," Samuel said firmly. "And you mentioned divorce papers. I didn't know you had initiated proceedings." "I hadn't planned to tell you until it was finalized." Sarah took a steadying sip of brandy. "After Hannah arrived, I realized I needed to sever all legal ties with Harold. The lawyer in Sweetwater said abandonment and failure to provide made it straightforward." Samuel nodded thoughtfully. "A wise decision, though it appears to have brought Harold back rather than driving him away permanently." "He doesn't want me," Sarah said with certainty. "He wants money, and he thought I might be his easiest path to it. Nevertheless, I don't like the idea of you being vulnerable to his reappearance." Samuel hesitated, then added, "Perhaps you should consider carrying a derringer. Mitchell's wife keeps one. I'm sure she could show you its proper use." The suggestion surprised Sarah. "You think that's necessary?" I hope not, but I would rest easier knowing you could defend yourself if needed. He finished his brandy and stood. Try to get some sleep. I'll have men patrolling through the night. As Samuel moved toward the door, Sarah called after him. You haven't told me about your trip to Cheyenne. Did you resolve the issue with the bull? A smile touched his lips at her attempt to return to normalcy. I did. Fine specimen, should improve our herd considerably. I'll show you tomorrow. I'd like that, Sarah replied, realizing she meant it sincerely. That night, with Hannah and Hope sleeping soundly on the trundle beside her bed, Sarah found herself reflecting on the day's events. Harold's reappearance had been jarring, but not in the way she might have expected. What struck her most was how completely her feelings for him had died where once there had been love, then fear. Now there was only pity for a man so consumed by greed and entitlement. More surprising was her reaction to Samuel's return, the profound relief that had flooded through her at the sight of him riding into the yard. The comfort she found in his steady presence as they discussed Harold's threats. There was something there, something growing between them that both frightened and exhilarated her. Morning brought no sign of Harold or his companions, but Samuel maintained increased vigilance around the ranch. He arranged for Sarah and Hannah to learn basic firearms handling from Mitchell's wife, Ellen, a capable woman who approached the task with practical efficiency. Nothing complicated, Ellen instructed, demonstrating the loading and firing of a small derringer. Just enough to discourage unwanted attention until help arrives. Sarah found she had a natural steadiness with the weapon, her hands remembering skills her father had taught long ago. Hannah proved equally capable, though she hoped never to need such knowledge. Life at Double Circle continued, though with a heightened awareness of potential threats. Samuel rarely left the ranch, and when ranch business required his absence, he ensured Mitchell or another trusted hand remained close to the main house. These precautions might have felt stifling, but Sarah found herself touched by his concern for her safety and increasingly aware of how essential his presence had become to her sense of well-being. August gave way to September, bringing cooler nights and the increased activity of fall roundup preparations. Harold's threatening return faded somewhat in urgency, though not in memory. Samuel and Sarah's relationship continued to evolve, their evening conversations extending beyond ranch business to personal histories, shared literary interests, and cautious explorations of future possibilities. Have you decided what you'll do when our year concludes? Samuel asked one evening as they sat in his study reviewing breeding records. Will you return to your homestead? The question had been increasingly on Sarah's mind. I'm not certain, she admitted. The property is secure now, thanks to you. But operating it alone would be challenging, and I've discovered I enjoy the work I'm doing here. Samuel set aside the ledger he'd been examining. I've been meaning to discuss that. Your reorganization of our records has increased efficiency considerably. Mitchell estimates will save nearly 8% on operating costs this year through better inventory management alone. I'm glad I could help, Sarah replied, warmed by the praise. It's more than help, Sarah. It's a valuable skill that deserves proper compensation. He leaned forward, his expression earnest. I'd like to offer you a permanent position here, not as part of our original arrangement, but as a properly salaried ranch manager overseeing all business operations. The offer caught Sarah by surprise. A permanent position, but what about our agreement? That will conclude as planned. You'll have your property free and clear, plus the wages we agreed upon. This would be an entirely new arrangement, beginning after our current one ends if you're interested. Sarah considered the proposal, recognizing it as both generous and practical. And Hannah and Hope, would they remain as well? of course. Hannah has proven herself invaluable in running the household. In fact, I'd propose increasing her wages as well to reflect her growing responsibilities. It was a solution that addressed many practical concerns, yet Sarah found herself hesitating. May I have some time to consider? Certainly. There's no rush to decide. Samuel rose, moving to the cabinet where he kept maps of the ranch's extensive holdings. In the meantime, I wanted to show you something I've been considering. He unrolled a surveyor's map across his desk, anchoring the corners with small paperweights. This is the southeastern section of Double Circle, bordering your property. His finger traced a line along the creek they had visited during their Sunday conversation. I've been thinking of establishing a horse breeding operation here, focusing on quality mounts for both ranch work and cavalry contracts. Sarah studied the map with growing interest. The terrain would be suitable. Good water access, sheltered valleys for winter protection. My thoughts exactly, but I lack expertise in bloodline selection and training methods. Samuel looked up, meeting her gaze directly. Your father raised cavalry mounts, you said. Would you have any interest in overseeing such an operation? The question stirred memories, long buried the pride in her father's eyes as he taught her to evaluate a colt's potential. The satisfaction of watching young horses develop under careful training. You're proposing I manage a breeding program for Double Circle. I'm proposing a partnership, Samuel clarified. Your knowledge combined with my resources. We would share ownership of the operation and its profits. The word partnership hung in the air between them, carrying implications beyond mere business arrangement. Sarah found herself unable to respond immediately, overwhelmed by both the opportunity and its possible meanings. Before she could formulate a response, a commotion outside drew their attention. Voices raised in alarm, followed by the unmistakable crack of gunfire, shattered the evening quiet. Samuel was moving instantly, crossing to the gun cabinet and withdrawing his rifle. Stay inside, he ordered, his tone brooking no argument. But Sarah was already reaching for the derringer she now kept on her person. What's happening? More shots rang out, closer now, accompanied by shouts and the sound of breaking glass from the direction of the kitchen. Samuel's expression darkened. It seems your husband has returned with reinforcements, he said grimly. And this time, he's not bothering with conversation first. The next hours blurred into a chaotic defense of the ranch house. Harold had indeed returned, bringing not just his original companions but several additional men of similarly desperate character. Their attack was better coordinated than might have been expected, suggesting Harold had spent the intervening weeks planning his revenge. Samuel, Mitchell, and the ranch hands who had been nearby when the attack began established defensive positions throughout the house. Sarah and Hannah, with Hope between them, took shelter in the root cellar beneath the kitchen, accessible through a trapdoor that Samuel insisted they close behind them. I'll signal when it's safe to emerge, he promised, handing Sarah a loaded revolver larger than her derringer. 3 knocks, pause, then 2 more. Except no other pattern. The cellar was cool and dark, smelling of earth and stored vegetables. Hannah clutched Hope to her chest, murmuring soothing words to keep the baby from crying. Sarah positioned herself near the trapdoor, revolver ready, listening to the muffled sounds of conflict above. Why is he doing this? Hannah whispered after a particularly loud exchange of gunfire. What does he hope to gain? Money, initially, Sarah replied, keeping her voice steady for the girl's benefit. Now, I think pride drives him more than practicality. Harold never could accept defeat gracefully. Minutes stretched into what felt like hours. Occasionally, footsteps crossed the kitchen floor above them, but no one attempted to open the trapdoor. Eventually, the gunfire tapered off, replaced by an ominous silence broken only by distant shouts that Sarah couldn't decipher. "Should we try to leave?" Hannah asked when the quiet had lasted nearly 30 minutes. "Find help in town." Sarah shook her head. "Samuel said to wait for his signal. We don't know what's happening up there." As if in response to her words, the trapdoor rattled. Sarah raised the revolver, aiming steadily at the center of the wooden panel. Hannah retreated to the farthest corner of the cellar, shielding Hope with her body. 3 knocks. A pause. 2 more. Relief flooded through Sarah, though she maintained her caution. "Samuel, is it you?" "It's safe now," came the welcome reply. "They've gone." Sarah opened the trapdoor carefully, the revolver still in her hand, to find Samuel standing in the kitchen. His shirt was torn and blood-stained, a makeshift bandage wrapped around his left arm, but he was upright and alert. "You're hurt," Sarah said, climbing quickly from the cellar to examine his injury. "It's minor," Samuel assured her, though his pallor suggested otherwise. "Bullet grazed my arm. Mitchell got the worst of it, took a shot in the shoulder, but the doctor's with him now. We sent for him as soon as the shooting stopped." Sarah helped Hannah and Hope up from the cellar, then insisted on checking Samuel's wound properly. The graze proved deeper than he had admitted, requiring thorough cleaning and proper bandaging. "What happened to Harold and his men?" Sarah asked as she worked, grateful for the steady hands that belied her inner turmoil. "Most fled when they realized we were better armed and positioned than they expected. The sheriff arrived with a posse just as they were retreating. They captured Harold and 2 others." Samuel winced as Sarah applied antiseptic to the wound. "The sheriff says there are wanted posters for at least 3 of Harold's companions. They'll be facing serious charges. And Harold, armed robbery, attempted murder, various other offenses. He won't be troubling you again for many years, if ever." Sarah finished bandaging Samuel's arm, her hands lingering longer than strictly necessary. "I'm sorry he brought this violence to your home." "Not your doing," Samuel said firmly, covering her hand with his own. "If anything, I'm grateful you were here. Your quick thinking in getting Hannah and Hope to safety, your calm under pressure, you're remarkable, Sarah Yates." Their eyes met, and something passed between them, an acknowledgement of emotions that had been building for months, now intensified by the danger they had faced together. The moment was interrupted by the doctor's arrival in the kitchen, seeking additional bandages for Mitchell's wound. The remainder of the night passed in treating injuries, securing the damaged ranch house and giving statements to the sheriff. By dawn, exhaustion had claimed them all. The following days brought a gradual return to normalcy. Repairs to the ranch house began. Mitchell recovered steadily from his wound, and news arrived that Harold and his captured companions had been transported to Cheyenne to await trial. The sheriff assured Sarah that with multiple witnesses to the attack and Harold's previous abandonment on record, her divorce proceedings would continue without requiring her testimony. A week after the attack, Sarah found Samuel in his study, reviewing the damage reports from various ranch buildings. His arm remained bandaged, but he had regained his color and strength. "Mitchell says the repairs should be complete before the first snow," she reported, setting down the latest inventory of replacement materials needed. "Good. We were fortunate the damage wasn't worse." Samuel set aside his papers and regarded her thoughtfully. "I've been meaning to finish our conversation from before the attack." Sarah took a seat across from him, suddenly nervous, though she couldn't have explained why. "About the horse breeding operation." "Yes, but more fundamentally about your future here." Samuel leaned forward, his expression earnest. "The attack clarified many things for me, Sarah. Life can change or end in moments. I don't want to waste any more time speaking in half measures and business propositions when what I really want to say is much simpler." He rose, moving around the desk to stand before her. "I care for you deeply. These months of working together, of building something meaningful here at Double Circle, have shown me that my earlier decision to embrace solitude was a mistake. I'm happier with you in my life than I have been in 12 years. Sarah's heart quickened as Samuel took her hands in his. "I feel the same," she admitted, the words both frightening and freeing. "I never expected to find such connection again." "Then let's not complicate it with separate arrangements and business partnerships," Samuel suggested, his thumbs tracing gentle circles on her palms. "Marry me, Sarah. Not for convenience or practical considerations, though there are many, but because I believe we could build a life of genuine happiness together." The proposal, while not entirely unexpected given the direction of their conversation, still took Sarah's breath away. "Samuel, are you certain?" "My situation is complicated: the divorce, Harold's legal troubles, my obligations to Hannah and Hope. None of which dissuade me in the slightest," he assured her. "Hannah and Hope would remain with us, of course. As for the divorce, the lawyer confirms it should be final within weeks. We could wait until spring if you prefer, or marry as soon as the legal matters are settled." He smiled, a rare full smile that transformed his features. "I find I'm not particularly patient now that I've made up my mind." Sarah found herself returning his smile, happiness bubbling up through layers of caution and past hurt. "Then yes, I will marry you, Samuel Young." His kiss was gentle yet profound, conveying promises words alone couldn't express. When they finally parted, Samuel kept her close, as if unwilling to let physical distance return between them. "I've been alone too long," he confessed quietly. "Convinced myself it was safer that way. Thank you for showing me what I was missing." "We've both been hiding from life in different ways," Sarah replied, resting her head against his shoulder. "Perhaps it took meeting someone equally wounded to find healing." The weeks that followed brought both practical preparations and emotional adjustments. News of their engagement spread quickly through Sweetwater and surrounding ranches, generating reactions ranging from genuine congratulations to inevitable gossip. Sarah found she cared little for the latter at 32. She had outgrown concern for small-town speculation. Hannah received the news with undisguised delight. "I knew it," she exclaimed when they told her. "Anyone with eyes could see you belonged together." Samuel laughed, surprisingly at ease with the girl's enthusiastic approval. "And here I thought I was being so circumspect with my feelings." "Not to me," Hannah assured him with the forthright manner that had become her trademark. "You watch her when you think no one's looking, and Sarah always straightens the pictures in the hallway before you come inside to make everything perfect." "Hannah," Sarah protested, feeling a blush rise to her cheeks. "Well, you do," the girl insisted unrepentantly, bouncing Hope on her hip. "And now we'll be a proper family, won't we?" The simple statement touched something deep in both Sarah and Samuel. "Yes," Samuel agreed, his voice suddenly husky with emotion. "We will." October brought Sarah's divorce decree, officially ending her marriage to Harold Yates, who remained in custody awaiting trial. With that final obstacle removed, she and Samuel set their wedding date for the first week of November, a compromise between his desire for immediacy and her wish for proper preparations. The ceremony took place in Sweetwater's small church, with Mitchell serving as best man and Hannah as matron of honor, Hope cradled in her arms throughout. The guest list included ranch hands, neighboring ranchers, and townspeople who had known Sarah since her arrival in Wyoming years before. Sarah wore a new dress of deep blue silk that Samuel had ordered from Denver, insisting it matched her eyes perfectly. As she spoke her vows in a clear, steady voice, she marveled at life's unexpected turns, how loss and betrayal had ultimately led her to this moment of profound happiness. "I now pronounce you husband and wife," the minister declared, his words bringing murmurs of approval from the assembled guests. "You may kiss your bride." Samuel's kiss was both reverent and promising, a public acknowledgment of private devotion. As they turned to face their friends and neighbors, Sarah caught Hannah's radiant smile and felt a completeness she had long abandoned hope of experiencing. The reception at Double Circle featured a feast prepared by Hannah with assistance from neighboring ranch wives, music provided by ranch hands with surprising instrumental talents, and dancing that continued well after sunset. As the celebration wound down, Sarah found herself on the porch with Samuel, watching the last guests depart under a canopy of Wyoming stars. "Happy?" Samuel asked, his arm warm around her waist. "Completely," Sarah confirmed, leaning into his embrace. "Though I keep expecting to wake and find this all a dream." "Not a dream," he assured her, turning her gently to face him. "A new beginning for both of us." Later that night, as they lay together in the quiet intimacy of their bedroom, Sarah whispered the question that had lingered in her mind since their first serious conversation. "Will you tell me now why you really paid my debts that day? The truth this time?" Samuel was silent for a long moment, his fingers tracing patterns on her bare shoulder. "I saw you in town that morning," he began finally. "You were leaving the bank, and your face, I've never seen such contained despair. You walked with your back straight and your head high, but your eyes held such devastation." "I remember that day," Sarah murmured. "Mr. Hollister had just confirmed that foreclosure was inevitable. I inquired about your situation, learned what Harold had done. And something in me couldn't bear the thought of you facing that alone." Samuel's voice grew softer. "Perhaps it was remembering my own despair after losing Eliza and our son. Perhaps it was simple human compassion. But I think, even then, some part of me recognized something in you that called to something in me." "And you asked only for my time," Sarah marveled, "when you could have demanded so much more." "Your time was all I wanted," Samuel replied, drawing her closer. "The opportunity to know you, to perhaps build something meaningful together. Everything else, this happiness we've found, that's beyond what I dared hope for." Sarah kissed him then, pouring into the gesture all the gratitude and love that words couldn't adequately express. Their shared past sorrows hadn't disappeared, but they had transformed into something new, a foundation of mutual understanding that strengthened rather than undermined their growing love. Spring came to Wyoming in 1876, bringing renewal to both the land and the expanded young family. The horse breeding operation that Samuel and Sarah had discussed before their marriage was now taking shape, with construction of specialized stables and the acquisition of promising breeding stock. Sarah applied her father's teachings and her own intuitive understanding of horseflesh, selecting foundation animals with the careful eye of a true breeder. Hannah, now 17, had blossomed into a confident young woman under Sarah's guidance. She managed the household with impressive efficiency while continuing her education through books Samuel ordered specifically for her. Hope, healthy and precocious at 15 months, toddled through the ranch house on unsteady legs, bringing joy to everyone she encountered. On a warm May afternoon, as Sarah returned from inspecting a newly arrived mare, she found Samuel waiting for her near the main corral. His expression held a mixture of excitement and nervous anticipation that immediately piqued her curiosity. "What is it?" she asked, dismounting from Willow, who had remained her faithful mount. Instead of answering directly, Samuel took her hand and led her toward the rise that overlooked her original homestead. "I have something to show you," he said, his voice carrying an undercurrent of suppressed emotion. As they crested the hill, Sarah gasped at the transformation below. The cabin had been expanded considerably, with a new wing extending from the original structure. The barn had been completely rebuilt, larger and more substantial than before. Fresh paint gleamed in the afternoon sun, and a garden had been planted near the creek. "Samuel, what have you done?" she asked, turning to her husband in amazement. "I know we agreed your homestead would remain as a fallback option, somewhere you could always return to if needed," he began, his expression earnest. "But I thought it might serve a better purpose as a home for Hannah and Hope when they're ready for independence." "A home for Hannah," Sarah repeated, trying to understand his intention. "She'll be 18 next year, old enough to consider her own future. I thought with your approval, of course, that we might deed the property to her on her birthday. A place of her own, yet close enough that we can continue to support and guide her." The thoughtfulness of the gesture brought tears to Sarah's eyes. "Samuel, that's perfect. She deserves a foundation for building her own life." "There's more," Samuel continued, his voice softening. "I had the builder include a nursery in the new section." Sarah's breath caught. "A nursery? For Hope?" "For Hope, yes, and perhaps." Samuel took her hands in his green eyes meeting hers directly. "Perhaps for cousins she might have in the future, Doctor. Bennett confirmed my suspicions yesterday when you went to town." For a moment, Sarah couldn't process his meaning. Then understanding dawned, bringing with it a wave of joy so intense she swayed slightly on her feet. "You mean I'm—" Samuel nodded, his own eyes suspiciously bright. "About 3 months along, according to the doctor. We'll welcome our child before winter." Sarah threw her arms around him, laughing and crying simultaneously. "Oh, Samuel, I never thought. At my age." "The doctor says you're in excellent health," Samuel assured her, holding her close. "No reason to expect anything but a normal pregnancy and delivery." They stood together on the hilltop, overlooking both the refurbished homestead that represented their past and the ranch that embodied their present, while discussing the future that now included a new life growing within Sarah. "Boy or girl, it doesn't matter," Samuel said, his hand resting protectively over the slight curve of her stomach. "Though I admit I've always imagined having a daughter with your spirit and determination." "And your kindness," Sarah added, covering his hand with her own. "Your generosity of spirit that saw value in a desperate woman with nothing to offer but her time." "You offered far more than time, Sarah Young," Samuel corrected gently. "You offered courage, resilience, and eventually, love. I remain the fortunate one in this exchange." As they walked back toward Double Circle Ranch toward home, Sarah reflected on the extraordinary journey that had brought her here. From the depths of despair on that spring day a year ago to this moment of profound contentment, her path had twisted in ways she could never have predicted. Yet each difficulty, each challenge overcome, had ultimately led her to this hard-won happiness. "Penny for your thoughts," Samuel said as they approached the main house, where Hannah could be seen on the porch, waving as Hope toddled beside her. "I was thinking about debts," Sarah replied, squeezing his hand. "How sometimes they lead to unexpected blessings when paid by the right person." Samuel's smile held all the warmth of the Wyoming sun. "In that case," he said softly, "I'd say we've both been repaid 1,000-fold." And as they reached the porch, as Hannah excitedly shared Hope's newest accomplishment and the evening's dinner plans, Sarah knew with unshakable certainty that no ledger could ever fully account for the riches they had found together. A family forged through hardship, a partnership built on mutual respect, and a love that had transformed them both from wounded survivors into something stronger and more complete than either had been alone.